back to another sewing tutorial. My name is Ann-Sophie and I'm the person behind Sewing with Solana, and today we're finally making the Layla dress. I have teased the dress already a few tutorials ago, and I posted a reel of me wearing it a few months ago, and it got, I think, 5 million views, which is crazy. And so many people in the comments have been asking for the sewing pattern, and I don't know why I've waited so long. I think I just had a lot going on with moving studios and stuff. But yeah, I'm really excited to film the tutorial finally today for you, and I'm going to link the sewing pattern down below. I have printed mine out in A4. My printer started to run out of ink, but I'm still able to see all the lines, but just when I put the sewing pattern together, maybe you won't see it as clearly, but I'm still going to show you and teach you and explain to you how to put the sewing pattern together. But yeah, my lines are a bit fainted, but I can still see them, which is all that matters. And I've been getting a few messages lately, because when you buy the sewing pattern, you get the sewing pattern in A4, A0 and US letter. And some people are confused which file you need to print out, and it just depends which paper you're using. In Australia, in Europe, and I think everywhere else in the world, we use A4 paper, and then when you print it on A4 paper, you have to print the A4 file. But in the US, they have a different paper size, which is very weird. And I think the paper size is called US letter. So if you're in the US, you have to print the US letter file. But then you also get the sewing pattern in A0. So if you want to, you could go to a copy shop and they could print it on like a big paper, which saves you a lot of time, because then you don't need to glue all the pages together. But yeah, so basically whichever paper you use, that's the file you need to print out, and just make sure you print it at a scale of 100%. And then it's really hard now to show on my paper, but there's 2 boxes that you need to measure. You just need to measure one. Like I always measure the 5 centimeters times 5 centimeters one. If that measures correctly, then all the settings of your printer were correct, and you can go ahead and print the remaining pages. So yeah, the first thing we have to do is we need to put the sewing pattern together, cut out our size. I'm gonna cut mine out in a size small, and then we need to cut out the fabric. And regarding the fabric, I have made this dress quite a few times, and I've always made it with 2 different kinds of fabric. I've either made it with linen and viscose blend, which is also what I'm going to be using today. I got my fabric from Spotlight. I'm going to link it down below if I find it on their website. And I've made the dress a few times also out of muslin cotton, or some people call it double gauze cotton, but I always call it muslin cotton. And both fabrics work perfectly for this design. The thing is, you want to use a fabric that's not too thick, not too stiff, because we have big puffy sleeves. We have, like for the skirt, we use quite a lot of fabric because we gather all the fabric together. And if you use a fabric that's really stiff, I feel like it doesn't suit the design so well. So if you want to use 100% linen, like if you don't want to use a blend of linen and viscose, for example, I would recommend using a linen that's lighter than the fabric we use, for example, for the Leah dress. For the Leah dress, I use fabric, like my linen has a weight of 205 grams per square meters. So if you want to make it with linen, I would maybe recommend using a linen that's like anything between 105 to 180 or 170 grams per square meters. But generally, I would recommend you using muslin cotton, a blend of linen and viscose, or just viscose, or maybe even tencel. Just use a fabric that's nice and flowy because the main reason the skirt has a lot of fabric, and you just want it, like just imagine you twirling around in a dress and you want the skirt to be like super flowy and girly. So yeah, just use a fabric that's not too stiff. What else? My favorite part about this dress is that you can wear it, not reversible, I think reversible would be if you can flip it inside out, but you can wear it either with a high neckline and then you have a V-neck at the back, or you can turn it around and you can have a V-neck in the front and a high neck in the back, which I think is really cool. And then we have big puffy sleeves, and there's an elastic around here, so you also need elastic. And you just need to have, you don't need to have a lot of elastic actually. It just needs to be enough elastic to fit around your arm. And then you need that ×2, so let me just measure how much elastic I'm going to be using. So I would recommend getting 40 centimeters of elastic, and then you'll have plenty for this project. What else? I think that's it. I'm gonna explain to you everything as we go. If you have questions, leave them in the comments or send me an email. And yeah, I'm really excited to make this dress. I feel like this dress is super nice to wear in spring when you, like, I feel like, okay, so I'm gonna make this in black because it's like winter is coming to Australia, and I just bought some black boots, and I think this dress and some black boots are gonna look really cool together. But I've also made this dress before in a beige, which looked super nice, and I feel like it's a bit nice, like it's a spring color. So I don't know, like of course you can also wear black, I don't know what I'm talking about, but I just feel like this dress is super nice to wear during a lot of seasons of the year. And yeah, I'm gonna be making mine in black because I've made it in black before, but I didn't bring it with me to Australia. So yeah, we're gonna make it black today, and please send me photos of you. I always love seeing how your pieces turn out, and also like it inspires me so much when I see what fabrics you use and what prints and what colors. So yeah, I'm gonna stop talking now, and we're gonna start putting the sewing pattern together, cut it out, cut out the fabric, and then we start sewing. So let's go. I have put my sewing pattern together now. I'm gonna link a reel down below where I show you how to put the sewing pattern together, because my page, just because I was running out of ink, you can't really see the lines too well, so I thought there's no point of filming it with this sewing pattern now. But in the reel I'm showing you how to put the sewing pattern together, because with my sewing patterns you don't have to cut off any edges, you just lay the pages on top of each other. But I'm just going to show you quickly now in which order they need to go. And usually I always put it on my table, like glue the pages together on the table, but this sewing pattern is quite big and it wouldn't fit on my table, so I did it on the floor. So I'm just going to show you now in which order the pages need to go, and then I'm going to cut it out, and then I'm going to start cutting out the fabric. I left out A1 this time because there's no sewing pattern on it anyway, and then it goes A2, A3, A4, A5, A6, A7, and then we start with B1 down to B7, C1 to C7, D1 to D7, and then here we have E4 and E5 to finish off the sleeves. So this is what it's gonna look like. So here's everything now that I have just cut out, and this is the front piece, and you need to cut it 2 times, and it's important that when you cut it out you fold the fabric. And then we have the second layer of the skirt here that you need to cut out 2 times, also unfold. Then we have the 2 straps here, then we have 2 times the back piece, also cut out, unfold. Then we have 2 times the sleeves and 2 times the first layer of the skirt, also cut, unfold. And here's what I mean when I say you have to cut it out, unfold. Like here, for example, it's the first layer of the skirt, and then here on this side it says fold. So you need to fold your fabric and then place this side of the pattern piece where the folded fabric is. I'm gonna start with our straps. So I'm gonna start with one of them, and then I fold it in half. And I'm gonna sew mine with a 1 centimeter seam allowance, but here it's a bit up to you. Like if you want your strap to be a bit wider, you can also sew it with 1.5 centimeter seam allowance or 2 centimeter seam allowance. And then I'm doing exactly the same to the other strap. And now I'm just gonna cut off some of that excess seam allowance because that makes it easier to flip it the other way around. So I'm just cutting like 0.5 centimeter to 1 centimeter away from the seam that we have just sewn. And as you could see when I was sewing, I kept one of the ends open, but then on the other end I sewed it closed. And this only works if you use a loop turner. If you're doing it with a safety pin, I don't think this is working. So if you do it with a safety pin, you have to keep both sides open. But now I'm taking my loop turner and I push it just like here is the seam, and I'm pushing it right below out, and then push it a little bit up for the little clasp to come out, and now I close it, and now I can flip the strap the other way around. Because the good thing is when you do it the way I did it, that now you have one clean edge of the strap, and this side here where it's still open, we're gonna sew that in between the two layers of the top part. So yeah. So next up, we're gonna take one of the back pieces, and then I'm also gonna take one of the front pieces. And what you want to do is you want to sew the shoulder parts together. So you're gonna line up the shoulder parts, and then you're gonna sew along here and along here. And then you need to repeat the same steps for your other front and back piece. So we sew here and now here. And now we're gonna do the same to the other front and back piece. And there's always 1 centimeter seam allowance already included in my sewing pattern, so you don't need to add it when you cut out the fabric. And now we're gonna go over to the iron and we're gonna press the seams open. And by pressing the seams open, I mean that we push them apart like this and iron them, just because it will give a nicer look to the outside of our cloth if we press the seams open. And I'm also gonna iron my straps. Okay, so now we're gonna sew them together, and we're also gonna sew in the straps. And how we're gonna do this? So one thing also, if you would want to, you could overlock this, but I'm not gonna overlock it because we're gonna sandwich, like we're gonna sew them together and then the bad sides are facing each other and you won't be seeing this anymore. Again, if you want to, you can overlock it. I'm not gonna do it. But what I'm gonna do now, I'm gonna make sure that the good side is facing me. This is the good side, this is the bad side where we can see the seam allowance here. So the good side is facing us. And then I'm taking the strap and I'm gonna place it. Here is our V-neck. I'm gonna place it 1 centimeter below this edge here. And I'm gonna pin it onto the fabric. And then I'm doing the same to the other side here. And now I'm taking our other front and back pieces that we have sewn together, and now you want to make sure that the bad side is facing you, so that the seam allowance here is facing you, so the good sides are facing each other. And you make sure that the front are on top of each other and the back and the back. And the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make sure that the shoulder seams on each of the shoulder are lining up, and I'm gonna pin it in place. Same over here. Then I'm gonna pin the end of the V-neck here together. And now I'm just gonna start pinning everything else together. So this is what it looks like now, and I'm just gonna start over here. Like, it doesn't really matter where you start. I'm just gonna start here and then go all the way around until we reach the point where we have started. And then once we get to the corner here, I'm gonna make sure my needle is down, then I lift the foot up, and then I can move the fabric. And now when we go over the strap, I would recommend you to sew over it 2 times. And then the same, once you get to the V-neck down here, you also make sure your needle is down. Then you can lift your foot up, and then you can sew up here again. What I'm gonna do now is first I'm gonna cut off all the thread here. Just sometimes I feel like when there's so many loose threads, it looks so chaotic and also a bit confusing. So I'm just gonna cut off the loose threads here. And then what you want to do is you want to take your scissors, and here with the V-neck, I'm just gonna cut it really close to our seam, because when you flip it the other way around, it looks so much nicer when there's not as much fabric built up. Just be very careful that you don't cut into the seam. And then you can also cut off a bit of the excess seam allowance here of the shoulder parts, because there's so many layers of fabric now. So I'm just gonna cut off a little bit here. Also on the other side. And now we can flip it with the good side facing us. And then we go over to the iron and we're just gonna press it all flat. Now we can put the top of our dress to the side for now, and we're gonna focus on the skirt because we have 4 layers or 4 fabric pieces now for the skirt, right? So we have the first layer, which you cut out twice, one time for the front, one time for the back. And then the second layer you also cut out twice, one time for the front, one time for the back. And what we need to do is we need to gather the fabric together. So here I have one piece from the first layer, and you need to change the settings of your sewing machine to the longest stitch length possible. For me, that's a 4. And then I'm also going to move my needle to the right, and I'm going to make a straight stitch from here to here. And it's very important that you don't front and back stitch. And also you want to leave a few extra centimeters of thread on both sides, because we're then going to pull on those threads and gather the fabric together. And you're just going to do that for all 4 pieces of fabric. So here's also the one piece of the first layer, and then here this even longer piece is the second. And again, you're gonna start over here and you finish over here, and same with the last piece. You're gonna start over here and finish over here. Don't front and back stitch. And now you take the top part of the dress again and you lay it in front of you. Right now there's no good and bad side, they're completely identical. So you just choose one side now, and I'm just going to start with the back piece. And you make sure that the 2 layers are lined up perfectly. And then you take one of the first layers of the skirt. The first layer are the shorter pieces, and you're just going to line up the sides here. I'm going to stick a needle in it, and then also on the other side. And now what you want to do is you want to pull on one of the threads here and gather the fabric together until it has the same length as the top part of the dress. So I'm just going to pull on this side for a bit, and then you can also pull on the other side. And just make sure that it's all evenly gathered. And then you can stick some needles in it if you want to. And then we're gonna sew it together, and just make sure that you change your settings back to a stitch length. I always have mine at 2.5 more or less. And I'm also gonna move my needle back to the middle again. So here's what it's gonna look like. Super nice. And now we're gonna do exactly the same to the front part. So here you need to make sure again that the 2 layers are lined up nicely. And then you take our second first layer and you line up the sides, pin it in place. You do the same on the other side, and then you do exactly what we did before. You're just gonna start pulling one of the threads and start gathering the fabric together so it has the same length as the top part of the dress. And now we're gonna sew along here again. Okay, so the next step now is to do exactly the same, but this time we're sewing the second layer onto the first layer. So here we have the back part, and here this is the first layer, and now I'm taking a second layer piece, and you need to make sure that the good side is facing you now. I'm just going to turn it around, it makes it easier for me. So here we have the good side facing us, and now I take the second layer, and again I'm just pinning the sides together first and also on the other side, and then we just repeat what we did earlier. We're gonna pull on the threads to make the second layer the same length as the first layer, and then we're gonna sew it onto the first layer. And now I'm gonna sew from here over here. And now we just need to do it one last time. So here we have the first layer of the front. Then I'm taking our last skirt piece, and we're just gonna do everything that we have done before. Next step now is to overlock what we have just sewn. So there's going to be 4 parts that you need to overlock. This part that we have just sewn, then here this part, and then the same on the other side, over here and over here. slowly getting there. The next step we need to do now is we need to attach the sleeves. And for the sleeves we also want to gather the fabric on top of the shoulder. So we're going to do exactly the same that we did to the skirt. We're going to make a long stitch across the top of the sleeve so we can gather the fabric together, and then we're going to start pinning it together, starting from the front and from the back, and then when we get closer to the shoulder part, we're going to start pulling the fabric together, pin everything in place, sew it, overlock it, and then we're going to sew the sleeve closed. And when we sew the sleeve closed, we're also going to sew the side of the dress closed. And then there's a few more other things we need to do, but number one, we're going to just start now attaching the sleeve to the dress. So let's go. Okay, so we take the sleeves. I'm just gonna separate them. And now the long stitch, we're just gonna do from here till more or less here. And you do it on both of the sleeves, and then we start attaching them. And with this sleeve, there's no front and back, because I made it the way that you can wear either the front to the back or the back to the front. So it doesn't matter if you start pinning this side to the front or this side, doesn't matter. But yeah, first we're gonna do the long stitch around here. So now it's important that you have the good side facing you. And I'm just gonna start with one side, make sure that it's all lined up here. And then I'm taking my sleeve and I'm gonna start pinning everything in place. So here's the front. Doesn't matter which side of the sleeve I'm taking. And I'm just gonna start pinning it. And then here's the back of the dress. And I'm gonna take the other side of the sleeve. And now that we're getting closer to the shoulder part, we can now start to gather the fabric together. And you want to make sure that the gathered part is where the shoulder seam is here. And now you just start sewing on one side until you reach the other side. And now we're gonna do exactly the same to the other side, so make sure that the good side is facing you again. And now we're gonna overlock what we have sewn on both of the sleeves. So we're gonna overlock from here to here, and then the same for the other sleeve. The next step is now to close the sleeve and also the side of the dress. So I'm gonna have the sleeve facing me with the good side, and I'm gonna fold it in half. And then here I'm gonna make sure that this seam is lining up, and I'm gonna pin it together. And then I'm just gonna pin down the sleeve and down the whole dress. And then I'm gonna repeat the same steps for the other side. And here when you sew down or like pin down the side of the dress, you also want to make sure that all the seams are lining up, just because then it looks much nicer. Okay, so we now need to hem the dress. So I would recommend you to try on your dress because that's the easiest way then to figure out how long you want yours to be. I am gonna fold mine up 1.5 centimeters and 1.5 centimeters again, but completely up to you. Try it on, figure it out for yourself. And then once we have done that, we're gonna focus on the end of our sleeve. Next up, we need to hem our sleeve, so you want to make sure that the bed side is facing you, and I would recommend you to fold it up 1 centimeter and then 1 centimeter again, and then sew all the way around, and then you do the same to the other sleeve as well. Okay, now we are getting towards the last step, and we want to create a tunnel because here's our sleeve and we want to get an elastic in here. So what we want to do is you want the good side of the sleeve facing you, and then you're gonna fold it up 12 centimeters. So right now, this is the good side of the sleeve, and now you folded it up, so now you have the inside of the sleeve facing you. And now you take your measuring tape and you fold it 12 centimeters up. And then you just pin everything in place. And now what you want to do is, you want to sew depending how wide your elastic is. So here's my elastic, and so my elastic is 1 centimeter wide, and what you want to do is I'm gonna now sew 2 centimeters away from the edge here, one time all the way around. And then I'm gonna show you what to do next. And then you want to flip your sleeve with the inside facing out. And what you want to do next is, so now we have this part here, right? And you want to fold it down and then sew it super close to the edge here, all the way around. But important, you want to leave a gap of a few centimeters because we then still need to pull the elastic through. So you just want to start at one point, start sewing. I would recommend sewing really close to the edge so there's enough space for your elastic. Leave a gap and then we're gonna cut off our elastic, pull it through, close the elastic, and then we close the gap. Now you take the elastic that you're working with and you wrap it around your wrist. I don't want mine to sit super tight, so I'm just gonna make sure it fits like this. Then I add a bit of seam allowance and then I cut it off. And I'm gonna measure mine just for reference for you. Mine is 19 centimeters long. Then I cut it off again for my other arm. And now I'm going to put a safety pin on both ends of the elastic. And then I start pulling it through the tunnel we have created. And then once you have both ends out, you can take the safety pins off and you want to overlap the two ends. And then you just sew over it a couple of times. I'm just going to pin a needle in there. Oops. And yeah, now you just sew the elastic together. And now I'm just going to pull on here so the elastic goes inside. And now we just need to close the gap here. So I'm just going to start a few centimeters where we have, like before we finished sewing before. And now I'm just going to sew a few centimeters over where we have started sewing earlier. We are now finished with our Layla dress. I am so happy how mine turned out. I'm going to show you what mine looks like in a few seconds. I just want to say thank you if you have purchased the sewing pattern. Thank you for watching this video. I really hope you were able to follow along. If you have any questions, send me a message, email, leave a comment. And I try to upload sewing tutorials every week here on YouTube. So I hope I see you next week again, and until then, I hope you have a good day. Goodbye.
just think